Hello, my name is Ava Layton, and I did my disease project on tuberculosis. So, tuberculosis has been around for a very long time, and throughout time it has gone by many different names. So, let's start off with the first name, which is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. This specifies the genus, Mycobacterium, and species, tuberculosis. Then, let's go on to its different names. So, in the 1700s, it was known as the White Plague. But in Greece, it was known as phthisis, which means progressively worsening condition. In Rome, it was known as tabes. This means chronic disease. And in ancient Hebrew, it was known as Sashifeth, which means wasting disease. But today, most common is either tuberculosis or for short, TB. So, moving on to the history of tuberculosis, the very first case was in 7000 BC in Israel. And from the 1600s to the 1800s, 25% of all the deaths in that time period was from tuberculosis. So, Dr. Robert Koch discovered the bacteria, and he was the one who wrote the first report about it. Then in 1921, quite a while later, a vaccine was finally made. And this vaccine is actually still used today and is recommended for people to get. Then, 19 years later, in 1940, progress was made toward treatment, and a mix of drugs was found to combat it and treat it. So, what's actually happening when you get tuberculosis? So, first, bacteria will enter into your lungs, usually by breathing it in. Then, if your immune system's strong enough, it'll stop there and you won't show any signs and you'll be fine. But if you have a weak immune system, then tuberculosis, the bacteria, will multiply and start spreading to different and other parts of the body. So, how can you get tuberculosis? Well, tuberculosis is transmitted through the air. If you or someone around you has it and are coughing, sneezing, talking, breathing, anything like that, then you can transmit it or contract it because it is an airborne bacteria. So how do you know if you have tuberculosis or not? Well, some of the symptoms, since it mostly affects the lungs, some of the symptoms are chest pain, pain while breathing, continuous coughing, which can last for multiple weeks, or coughing up blood or mucus. But some other symptoms are fatigue, fever, unintentional weight loss, or chills. So, how do you treat tuberculosis once you have it? Well, there's a vaccine, which we mentioned earlier, that is used to prevent it, and most kids get it very early on. So, many people are vaccinated for TB. But for actual treatment, it's mostly drugs, and there are around 10 of these which are actually approved by the US FDA. The four most popular ones are isoniazid, rifampin, ethambutol, and pyrazinamide. And with these, there are different combinations and doses for each of these drugs, depending on which stage of treatment that a patient's in. So there are two phases in most treatment plans, and the first phase is called the intensive phase. The second phase is called the continuation phase. So in the intensive phase, usually you're taking isoniazid, rifampin, ethambutol, pyrazinamide, all of those daily for 8 weeks or for the first 2 months of treatment. After this, after these 2 months or 8 weeks, you go into the continuation phase. And this usually is laying back on some of the drugs. You don't take as much of each, and you don't take them daily or as often. So, what happens when you are treated? Well, usually there are positive outcomes. You're fine, you get treated, you live. But if you have a delay of treatment or you just go without it entirely, then your chances of survival aren't as high. There are other negative or other factors that can cause negative outcomes, such as age or impaired immune system. And this is the same over many different diseases, where age and your immune system will affect your likelihood to get over it. So now let's move on to the worldwide prevalence of tuberculosis. So in 2018, there were 1.7 billion cases of tuberculosis throughout the world. And this is around 23% of the world's entire population. And out of these 1.7 billion cases, around 1.5 million do not survive on average. And this is mainly because a lot of cases are completely missed by healthcare systems. And on average, there are around 3 million cases of TB that are completely missed. So let's focus in going down to the United States. So the prevalence in the United States is around an average of 8,000 per year. In 2022, there was actually 8,300 cases. And luckily, this has actually decreased since 1992, which is a really good thing. So focusing in a little bit more, we have the Colorado prevalence. So for this, there's been a decrease since 2000, or in this case, we're going to focus in on 2011 to 2020. So in just 2020 alone, there were 52 cases, and that is quite a big decrease from 70 to 52. And something that I found quite interesting was the fact that Denver has the most amount of cases, and this is probably because of the population density in Denver. But from this table, you can see that there is the 11 out of the 52, which is 20%, while other places have around 1 or 2, and lucky for us in Douglas County, or Castle Rock, which is in Douglas County, we had 0 cases in 2020. So yeah, it has been decreasing, which is a good thing. So what discoveries have they made in tuberculosis? What have they found in the past 5 years? Well, treatments haven't been working as well because of drug resistance. And they didn't really find this out or think of it as a reason that it wasn't working. But drug resistance obviously will make it so the drugs, which we mentioned before and are the main thing which is used for treatment, aren't working. So that can really be bad for those who are drug resistant and have tuberculosis. They also found that the vaccine wears off over time, which is quite interesting because it has been around for quite a long time, and they have found that it's around 5 years that it wears off. So quite interesting. So with that, that is all I have about tuberculosis. Thank you for watching or listening to my presentation.